Hey guys and girls, welcome to the What We've Been Watching thingy for March 2024. My guests this month are Alyssa and Jess from Horror Movie Tea, who I've had on before. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks
for doing
Glad
this.
to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're good. No, I was like, oh, it's a good time.
That might be that might be an indication of things to come. But yeah, you know the drill, guys, by now. We talk about what we've been watching in the world of film and TV. Hopefully have some recommendations for you guys as well, and where you can find stuff. And yeah, we have a bit of a chat about it, and we want you to do the same in the comments. Let us know what you've been watching. So we're going to start off with movies this time, and we're going to start off with Alyssa, what she's been watching.
Gonna put me in the hot seat. So the first movie on my list that I watched that I had never seen before, but is apparently a classic, is Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. If you're not familiar with that movie, it's based off of a true story where this woman finds like this town. They're having all of these like really terrible like cancer diagnosis, like all of these health issues. And I find out that the water treatment company was sweeping things under the rug. And so it's her working with a lawyer, like to essentially get justice for those people. It's like the movie itself is really good. It's like a mix of like, it's satisfactory at the end as far as like how the conclusion it has. Julia Roberts does a great job making Erin be like a very she's spicy. She's a spicy lady. So that adds a lot of comedy because you have this lawyer that's like very like serious. And then this woman that's just like, why aren't you doing something type of thing. But yeah, it's a really good movie. If you haven't watched it yet, I definitely recommend. My only thing is I don't know, whenever a movie says based off of a true story, it's automatically like a little grain of salt in my head because I was like, I don't know if it's very loosely based off of a story or what the whole details are. But as far as the movie itself, though, really good. Definitely recommend.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen that one, Jess?
I have not.
No. I'm trying.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to think if I've seen it all the way through. It's definitely one I've seen bits of, and I know she won the Oscar for it, and it was highly praised. And I guess it was one of her like meaty type roles where she got to prove that she can do a bit more than just the rom-com stuff.
Yeah,
but it's meant to be a very good film, from what I hear. So yeah, worth
very
a
good
look.
film.
Watch Damsel. It's on Netflix right now, and it's got Millie Bobby Brown. And she plays 11 on Stranger Things.
Yeah,
that's what most people are going to know her from. And it was actually a really good film. It had kind of a D&D type vibe. Girl goes into this kingdom. She's going to marry the prince, and then she gets pushed down a hole in a cave and is basically sacrificed to the dragon.
Okay.
But she's trying to find a way out of the cave alive and get back to her family. But it had a moment where the CG it wasn't as good early on. I feel like they kind of missed polishing one of those scenes, but the rest of it was actually really well done. And the main character was very smart in her choices. And it was very interesting.
Okay.
So
yeah, that was a movie that I've seen too. And yeah, like honestly, that's probably one of my favorite movies so far of 2024. Like it really takes a spin on the fantasy and dragon stuff. Like the dragon, they actually like my whole thing with like the way that fantasy genres like portray dragons is it's like, yes, dragons are scary if you think about it, but all of the fantasy like movies are like dragons are just cool, but this movie actually makes the dragon like really formidable and like really
Oh yeah,
terrifying.
yeah. It can be a problem.
Yeah, it's actually like, and it's got some really good tension. I really like the twist of, oh, it's like the princess being given to a dragon or whatever. And I like that it has a lot of layers to unwrap as far as like the true intention, because the dragon's being tricked too, essentially. Where like essentially the family has to deal with the dragon that as long as they keep sacrificing members of their family, their kingdom will remain. Well, daughters. Okay, yes, daughters. Then their kingdom will remain safe. But what they've been doing instead is they'll marry they'll marry off to someone, and then they'll like cut their palms and like combine their blood and then throw them into the pit, so that way they smell like they're of the royal
they smell
family.
royal blood.
Yeah, and so it's like, oh man, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the ending is like, oh, so satisfying. It's
It
just
is
like
very satisfying.
Yeah, it's like it's that, and you're like, yeah, like. But it's like it's one of those things where like, yeah, the dragon in and of itself is like formidable and very dangerous, but the royal family of that kingdom is not as pleasant as they come off to be initially.
Yeah, the ending is very satisfying in that regard, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
nice.
I also appreciate how in this movie the dragon is actually not. It's a dragon. It's not a wyvern, like they do in so many fantasy movies these days. Like they're like, it's a dragon. No, it's a wyvern. Don't lie. But this one is actually a dragon, and it made me so happy.
And they had some interesting dragon lore that I haven't really seen before. Like whenever you get to see the baby dragons like birth from like the egg or whatever, and the yolk is liquid gold, and I thought that was such a cool concept, because it's like, dragons are known for like collecting treasure and stuff like that. It's like, so they're born in liquid gold, like no wonder. I thought that's a really cool detail there.
Okay, that's cool. Well, it's on my list to see. It's come out in the last 2 weeks or last couple of weeks on Netflix, and yeah, I do like Millie Bobby Brown a lot, and it'll be interesting post Stranger Things where her career leads, because she's such a mega star for that show, but sometimes people struggle to then be taken seriously and have a career outside of that. So
but she did really, really well in this role.
In this film, right? Okay, so I will check that out definitely. Okay, well, I can do 4 films in one here, because with the release of the new Ghostbusters, I've been getting into Ghostbusters fever on the channel. So I've watched all of the previous 4 movies. There's reviews for 3 of them, and there's a review for Afterlife on the way. And then I'm going to check out the new one. I'm going to see it. I
can't wait to try the new one. Yeah.
It'll be interesting. So I'll just sum up my thoughts on the previous 4. So obviously the original is a classic. It's still a classic. It still holds up.
Yes.
The second one, not so much. It's a bit of a mess, a bit of a underwhelming sequel in many ways. I read a little bit about the background of that one, and I know it was a very messy production where there was a lot of falling out with Bill Murray and the president of Columbia at the time. Obviously, Murray wasn't so keen about coming back for a sequel, and there was a lot of rewrites of the script. I think they had an original good idea for the script, but by the time you had all these rewrites and the mess, I think that's why. I would say it's still a film that's worth seeing, but I did rewatch it recently, and I did find it underwhelming again. So, bit of a disappointing sequel.
I think it hits different when you're older.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, it's fine and it's fun and all, but it's just
Yeah.
not the same when you're older.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's
like-
like, or sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think with as a kid, sorry, you sort of accept it more, and it was like I remember the stuff with the baby and the start of the film as a
Mhm.
kid dragging a little bit because I think I just wanted them to get to the ghost stuff.
Yes.
But like at the same time, I probably did enjoy it more as a kid
Yeah.
than I did rewatching it now.
Yeah, it's funny how like there's a lot of movies that have a rough production history, and a lot of the time you can see it reflected in the film. Like, but there are some cases where you're like, "What? They had a bunch of issues." I forgot which film came out more recently that had a lot of production issues, but ended up being a pretty solid film.
Yeah.
But it seems like the majority, it's a trend that if they have a rough production history, then it's gonna be kind of a piecemeal film.
Yeah, because you've got Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis writing the script again. The gang are back. So there's no reason why it couldn't have turned out better. I think a lot of it is to do with those production issues.
Yeah.
So then we move on to the all-female film, which it was the first time, well, not a first time watch, but a rewatch, but the first time since the cinema. And I think when I saw it in the cinema, I went with the flow of it and I kind of got into it, even though I said, yeah, that probably wasn't that good, but I think I just got into the spirit of it. And then I think it's partly because it's quite early on in these kind of nostalgia type sequels than we're getting, but it is a bad movie. I don't think it's as terrible as some people make out, but it is a bad movie and it's a mess of a movie. And I think my main issue with it is then they do this weird sort of soft reboot thing where they
Yeah.
kind of pretend then the other characters from the originals don't exist. But at the same time, they sort of want their cake and eat it because they're doing that. But on the other hand, they are sneaking in these quite cheesy on the nose references.
Hmm.
And I just think, well, you do one or the other. You either make it like a full-on reboot. So we're starting again with these characters, but you kind of acknowledge like the continuity. Or you just make it a sequel type thing. So you do one or the other. You don't do this weird in-between thing.
Yeah.
Because you get all this weird stuff where they reference the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, but it's just like a balloon type thing. But
Yeah.
they're sort of making it look like, oh, he's threatening type thing. And I think the cast are pretty good, but the jokes just aren't funny. Like a lot of them anyway. You get a few good ones, but the jokes are very like random, sketchy Saturday Night Live style jokes.
Yeah.
Where they're just riffing on things that have nothing to do with the story in many ways. And it's almost like the occasional one will hit. So with Ghostbusters Afterlife, it was actually a first time watch for me. So that's in the last week or so. And I've got to say, I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I know they hit you over the head with the nostalgia stuff and tying it back to like, yeah, and it's not an original movie in any way. So if you're looking for that, then it's not the movie for you. But what I liked about it was the twist and they put on it, making it like a kid's movie. And I almost think of the horror in it as more like Goosebumps style horror.
Yeah.
And it's definitely harking back to almost like the 80s tradition of like Goonies or like Stephen King type stories. And that's what I like about it. I like that you got a different feel to it with that, and you got invested in like this family, and it was almost a bit of a love letter to the 80s. And I thought the stuff with the original Ghostbusters, I thought that was well handled, and I think it was hard not to be emotional at the end, the way they did work like Egon into the story.
Yeah.
But It was very well cast. I mean, Paul Rudd is hard to dislike. I love the running gag of him showing like 80s horror to his students on like VHS as well. So just to go extra retro. But
Yeah.
it was surprisingly good. Like, I'm not saying it's amazing, but it was surprisingly good. And as it stands, it might actually be my second favorite Ghostbusters movie, which is a bit of a hot take maybe, but I enjoyed it quite a lot. So yeah.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that one. It's been a while. I watched it when it shortly after it first came out, but it's been a minute
Yeah.
since then. I remember liking it, and I remember appreciating it a bit more than the previous movie that they had come out with. I did like that third one, but it's one that I definitely would have to be in the mood for.
Mm-hmm.
It was, the humor in particular is very, it's not an everyday kind of humor
Yeah.
thing. Sometimes the jokes will hit, sometimes they won't, and it's one that I again just have to be in the mood for. It's very silly. It's
Yeah.
not as the plot isn't as strong as the other films.
Yeah, because I think what they were going for, because like all the cast are, I mean, obviously people know Melissa McCarthy for things and Christian Wiig, but all the cast do come from that Saturday Night Live
Yeah.
background. And I think they were going for that because that was true of the original film. You know, 3 of the
Yeah.
4 started on there. But the difference was in the original, like when they made jokes, it just felt like natural jokes
Yeah.
which those
Yeah.
characters would make.
It wasn't forced, it was more organic.
I haven't seen the third one, but it's like from hearing everyone's feedback is like, but I you've sold me on the fourth one though. I'm gonna have to go watch it.
I still feel like you should watch the third one just because I think some of the humor you'll appreciate.
Yeah.
Not
And-
maybe not all of it, but some of the humor.
And you're a nerd, Alyssa, so it's your duty to tick these boxes.
You got to collect the whole set.
Fair,
Yeah.
fair. I gotta collect the whole set.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay,
Uh,
so we're back to Alyssa.
We've watched every Saw movie. You might as well watch every Ghostbuster movie too.
Oh, poor you.
well, speaking of Saw,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and lead us into that. So, the next movie that both Jess and I have seen was Saw 10. So they completely I don't understand why they called it Saw 10 because it is not a sequel to the series or a soft reboot or anything like that. It's literally whenever Amanda and I forgot the detective's name, but the detective is working alongside Jigsaw. Jigsaw, or John, he has brain cancer. And so he's trying to find a cure because he, of course, doesn't want to die. And he goes to Mexico to get this revolutionary treatment. And lo and behold, it's BS and he was tricked. And so it's like him like getting revenge because it's not like they didn't just play him. Like they had been playing people for years and they're like, I think like millionaires from it.
Well, they got like $250,000 just from him.
Yeah.
And they were doing this to several people at a time.
Yeah. So it is like almost like a revenge story, but also, I mean, they still had like their problems that they could like work through or whatever in the games. It's like, on the one hand, I'm like, why did you call it Saw 10? Like you could have just, just made it more obvious that was a part of the storyline rather than like a continuation of it. But besides that, the movie wasn't that bad. I was enjoying it until the end where they really like leave off. Like they have like the most evil of the characters, the one that is actually like facilitating, like making the money off of these cancer patients. They have her show like surviving, and then they just cut it off, and they don't. It's like what? And so it's like it makes you like almost mad because it's like they set it up to it being like a retribution or a revenge movie, but then you don't actually get that satisfaction of like these characters paying for it. But I will say I did not some of the traps that they came up with or the puzzles were really stupid.
Yeah.
Like I absolutely hate eye stuff. But they had this one where it's like goggles and it's like tubes. And so at the end of the game, it's like I hate eye stuff. But I was laughing because when he lost, he sucked his eyeball. So you see they're like whoop, like like it's like really comedic.
Yeah, it was definitely comical for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like I feel like as many Saw movies as there are, and as many like beating a dead horse as these movies have been, I feel like this movie actually did have the potential to be a kind of like refresh the series, but between them like not being clear on the name, having kind of some really strange, stupid traps, and then not having like the satisfying ending. It's so like I can take it or leave it, but I at least think it's a little bit better than the last couple of ones that have come out though.
Yeah, that's fair. They definitely did take a crowbar and like shove this story into like the middle of the plot line. Like it's definitely not a sequel. It's like they took that crowbar and just shoved it in the middle of everything else. Like, oh, this is a random point in time when he was still alive that this is all happening, and it actually has no bearing on the overall arcing plot.
Yeah. But I found the story interesting. Like I was invested in the story, and I like that it focused more on the story itself of him trying to get a cure than the actual games. Because that's whenever they start only focusing on like the detectives trying to find like Jigsaw or rescue the people, that's where it gets stale really fast, because then it's like a cat and mouse game, and it's like we've been seeing it over and over again. But like with this, like I was actually invested and wanted. I mean, we know that John dies, but it's like I was interested to see, well, if this is actually the case, then how did he die? And you kind of get
or like,
red flags
did it come back? Like, did he get rid of it, but did it come back?
Yeah, which I think would have been a sellout. And so I'm glad that they just made it like more trickery than actual like it reemerging or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like I was actually interested in the story, but yeah, it can't carry the series.
It definitely can't. It was all right. Personally, I feel like this one I could probably leave it. I was bored at some points because I mean it's a Saw movie. Like honestly, once you've seen one or two of them, you've kind of seen them all.
Yeah.
It was gore for the sake of gore. Some of the games like they didn't give them quite enough time.
Yeah.
Like they were doing the thing, but it just like, they could only go so fast.
Yeah, it's like they paused for like maybe 10 seconds after the timer started, and then they were like, doing
and
what
people are gonna
to
panic in that situation. Like give them a little bit of time, because clearly they're trying to survive. Like they're doing the thing. It's not like they were denying the entire time. Nope, ain't doing it. Just sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for death. No, they were actually doing the thing.
And that's kind of the sin of most Saw movies as they've kind of like gone through the series, is they just they rigged the games to where it's really not in the person's favor. While in the first movie, they really like took a point to be like, well, I mean, it depends on the puzzle, because
Depends
like
on the
Amanda's
person.
game, that person was screwed. Like
It-
but
yeah.
for the most part, they made it like very survivable if you
Yeah.
could like push through it.
Yeah, and the whole point of his theology, I guess, was that the people that wanted to survive should survive. And the games were supposed to be inherently winnable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would suck.
A lot.
It would suck a lot. But they were still possible. But some of them just seemed a little just shy of possible.
Yeah.
I didn't rush out to see it, and it was like I keep hearing people say it's the best in a while, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
In a
probably
while,
is,
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's better than a lot of the ones with like just the detective or just Amanda and the detective. It was nice that he was back and we got to see a little bit more of his struggle with cancer and
right.
trying to help others live better in the worst way. But you know. But it's still one that if you don't see it, you're not necessarily missing anything.
No, okay.
Yeah. But if you like the Saw series, I
Yeah.
feel like you would get something out of it, though.
So I've been watching some movies from 1984. That's a bit of a theme because 40 years, and
Yeah.
I've been watching some horror stuff on streams from that year. The first one I'm going to talk about isn't a horror movie, actually, but it was a first-time watch, and it was really shitty. That's not the name of the film, although it might have been
Not where I thought you were going with that.
It's called Electric Dreams, and yes, they do play that song, and yes, it's absolutely terrible. So yeah, this film is ridiculous. It's the sort of movie I'd heard before, and it has a bit of a reputation. So it's about a computer kind of going slowly mad and turning evil almost, and wrecking this guy's life. And so it's 84, so it's at quite an early age in like the internet or computers and technology. So it's this kind of geeky, nerdy guy who has a crush on the girl next door. She's played by Virginia Madsen, so quite an early role for her. Same year she was in June, by the way. But so he has a crush on her, and she's like a violinist. I think she goes to like classical classes, and there's an interest there because he uses his computer for music. And there's this really odd random scene where she's in her apartment practicing, and the computer starts playing like classical music, and they can hear, like, she can hear it through the wall, and she just keeps playing, and it becomes this moment, but she doesn't know who it is in the other apartment. And this is where I think it turns a little bit into a stalker type film, because
Oh no.
he then kind of pursues her. And I think they hit it off, but the underhanded thing is then she doesn't know it's him in the other apartment. She doesn't know it's him who had the computer with the music. And so, but that's where they're going. Computer getting a mind of its own and kind of taking over and doing all sorts of wacky things. That it sort of ruined his lifetime thing, and it takes a turn. And then there's another guy at like her practice where she kind of hits it off with him, who is like a perfectly nice guy, but the movie almost portrays him as like a villain. Whereas to me, the lead guy is much more of a villain, and that's like the problem I had. Because they do that thing later on in the movie where he does get a bit too big for his boots, like almost he suddenly feels more confident, and you do turn him into a bit more of an asshole. But there's inconsistencies like that where it's kind of like, well, I don't know what suddenly happened that makes him feel this confident. Like there wasn't really enough in the movie. But one of the big problems is then you're expected to like this guy, and I just never did, and I just never felt chemistry between the two. And the movie really doesn't know what it wants to be, because it kind of wants to have a romantic element, but then it wants to do this, computers getting out of control, turning evil, and it wants to be other things. Like, it tries to be dark at times, but then it wasn't that sort of movie from the start. And it's just a mess of the film, because it even seems confused whether you're supposed to be sympathetic with the computer at one point. But it's really badly directed, because like it looks like a collection of pop videos. That's what it's like watching it. Like, just one pop video after the other, rather than having everything connected. And I tell you what, the best scene in the movie is, and it's one of those so bad, so cheesy, it's actually entertaining scenes. But you'll have to look the scene up later. But it's like the computer at one point actually sings like a love ballad. It's the guy in his room, and the computer is singing a love ballad. And they do this whole thing where the computer is like falling in love with the girl, sort of thing.
Oh, no.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to look that up now.
Yeah. But it's funny, because it's sort of film I've heard people talk about, and then when I finally watched it, I thought, well, why do they like this film? It's terrible.
Question their entire taste in
Yeah.
movies.
And also, it's the sort of movie I think you've seen done better in other movies, like because it felt a little bit like War Games, like that Matthew Broderick movie.
Mhm.
And
That one was good.
I like that, and that's sort of this idea done much better. And
Yeah. It also sounds a little like 2001 Space Odyssey.
oh yeah, I can see that.
Or Her, maybe.
Yeah.
Or iRobot.
But there's just some random scenes. Like, I mean, there's scenes where I'm like, well, what's going on? What's the story here? Because
Pick a lane.
there's a scene where they decide to spend some time together, and they randomly go to Alcatraz, and it's like, this is a romantic scene, and she's got like a hat from the gift shop, and then it cuts to the computer just at home doing the computer's own thing, and because it controls the TV, like it puts on like old movies and stuff. Like, it's terrible. It's like there's one or two amusing moments, but apart from that, it's absolutely terrible. So big thumbs up. It's on YouTube.
I watched I forgot what the actual title of the film is, but the Weird Al movie with Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes! Yes! I have seen it. It's hilarious.
Yes. Well, okay. Me and my husband were watching it on date night last Friday, and we went into it thinking this is like a biographical like movie. No, like it did not take us long to be like, no, this is not a serious movie whatsoever. It was great. A really fun movie. You just have to like sit back and enjoy the ride. Yeah, it's very much a spoof of like the Queen movie that like came out, where they're following Al's like life, but then like weird stuff happens along the way, and crazy stuff happens, and then they just completely turn the events. It's just it's a fun ride. I really enjoyed that movie.
The Al Yankovic story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Worth it. Hilarious.
Yeah.
Complete BS, but worth it.
Okay. So good BS rather than the bad BS I was just talking about.
Yeah. And I really enjoy the fact that like Daniel Radcliffe has just like gone off the edge and like, I'm gonna do all of the weird movies.
Yes.
Because like all of the movies that he's been in that are kind of like unhinged, I've enjoyed.
Oh yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
oh man,
he's got to do weird things to make a break from Harry Potter,
yeah.
because
But
otherwise he's going to be in that situation where he's just cast in the same roles over and over and over. And he wanted something completely different, and he's getting it.
well, and I know from like an interview, because I watched like Swiss Army Man, and that's an interesting one because Daniel Radcliffe just plays
I
a
haven't seen
corpse,
that one yet.
specifically a farting corpse. Like,
Yes.
it's a weird, but it's like a very strange but kind of endearing movie. A lot of weird ways. But yeah, Swiss Army Man, look it up. But
Yeah.
but I was like, okay, I got to see an interview of people like asking him questions about this movie because I want to see what his thought process was. And essentially, like he's like he wants to purposely pick the really weird roles because it feels like it expands his skills as like an actor. And I mean, it
Yeah.
adds more interest, I'm sure too.
It definitely does, for sure. I think he did really well in Guns Akimbo. That was
I haven't watched
That
that one
was
yet, but I
out
want
there.
to.
Oh, you should. You should.
But yeah.
But that one was good. Also, Alyssa and I watched Imaginary in theaters.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one hit a little close to home, considering the main character's name is my name, and she has a stepdaughter with the same name as my daughter.
Oh wow. Spooky.
A little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh.
the daughter is being targeted by this entity, kind of like an imaginary friend that's a little pissed off and makes me want to throw away her teddy bear. So
Yeah, like that movie I really enjoyed. Like I feel like that it's one of the better like kid imaginary friend horror boogeyman movies, but the one thing that I wish they had expanded on is you would see like these humanoid like creatures in the background and they were really freaky and they gave some really good
Yeah.
like
it was almost like Slenderman type vibes.
yeah, but it's like they didn't do anything with them. Like they just
they could have
showed
done a lot
them
better with
and
that.
didn't explain and yeah. So there was some pieces
a lot
missing.
of good tension.
Yes.
A lot of good tension. There were some decent scary-ish moments. But it was not quite as solid as it could have been.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people give it some flack, but it's not as bad as all that. Again, could be a bit more solid, but they had some really good moments as well. They also had certain moments with some humor, especially at the end. The three girls walk into a hotel because their house is gone now, and they see a kid with a bear, and they just like freeze, and they're like, "I see it too." And the little girl goes, "Next hotel?" They're like, "Yes," and they leave and try to find a different hotel instead.
And I do want to give the movie credit that it's like I feel like so many like boogeyman or imaginary movies towards the end the movie becomes even less scary because they like show too much or they don't know how to wrap it up well. This one I feel like was pretty strong even when it was at the end where you could see the monster where you were in this imaginary world or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it definitely still they did a good job on keeping it the horror mood.
Yeah.
Rather than just tense.
Yeah, there were moments in the imaginary world that I feel could have been a little bit better, but all in all, it was fairly strong there. We went into it cautiously optimistic because it's like a Blumhouse film. And lately those have been like 50-50. They're really hit or miss.
Yeah.
This one was fair hit though.
Okay. So a mild sort of recommendation in a way. Yeah.
It's not like we're gonna see it at a specific time of the year or something every year. Or this is not like a new favorite or anything, but it's definitely worth a watch.
My mate has a monthly like film club, So it was the latest film at his film club. It's a British film called Angel Share, which I'd seen one time before when it came out. So this was a rewatch, and someone at the club picked it. So it's a Ken Loach film. He's done films like Kez, and Kathy Come Home. So very gritty sort of British dramas and very kind of like socialist dramas. You know, he likes to look at how kind of capitalism or the government has an effect on working class people at times. But this was one of his lighter, more feel-good movies. So the setup is then you have like someone who's just come out of prison but is still having problems adjusting to life back in society and still having issues with leaving the old life behind. But he does have a girlfriend who is pregnant at the start of the movie, so he's caught between those two lives and wants to settle down and do the right thing. So he goes to like this kind of like for ex-offenders type thing where they go on trips. It's whiskey, sorry, I've said that right. It's at a whiskey like tasting event. Even better. And this is in Scotland where they've got a great reputation for whiskey. But like he gets an interest in it.
I want to visit there sometime.
He gets an interest in it, and they hatch up a little scheme to kind of like sneak in and take some of this whiskey and sample it and then try and sell it off to like higher bidders and things like that. So it almost becomes kind of like a heist type movie. At that point, you get a lot of build up before that. And like I said, it is like a feel-good movie, like compared to the director's other movies, at least. And it is a little bit more of a lighter comedy, but you do get darker moments. Like you do get some moments where he gets involved in scrapes, and like the family of his girlfriend basically wants him out of her life and is willing to like beat him up to try and get the message across. So he's sort of caught between the two. But it's a solid movie. Like you follow the characters, you get into their story and their sort of plight, and it's a feel good, plucky underdog type story. And I think you might need subtitles though because of the Scottish accents, because even I struggled understanding some.
It can be difficult for sure. Yeah.
But that's the Angel Share. So that's solid, I would say, worth a look. Iron Claw, I went to see that.
Okay.
And it's about the Von Erich wrestling family. So actually Texas based.
I hadn't even heard anything about it.
You haven't? Okay. I mean, part of that might be if you're not a wrestling fan, you might not have heard. But, so I won't say anything, because if you don't know anything about the story, it's worth going in fresh. But it's obviously based on true events. And it's just a tragic story involving this wrestling family where like you have this promotion run by their father, and at some stage most of his kids get involved in the business. So it's sort of 80s into the early 90s, and it focuses on one particular person, which is Kevin, who's played by Zac Efron, and he takes up most of the focus, and just him and his reaction to what's happening to his family. So I probably won't say more because it's like getting into spoilers, but I thought it was a really well done movie. Like it's very well cast. Like they get the casting so well, and they get the feel of like 80s wrestling, like in a certain like territory, and the in-ring stuff is done really well. But I think what they do well is they don't go down a rabbit hole when it comes to like the inner workings of like pro wrestling, because other movies have struggled with that. Like, I think early wrestling movies, they just treat it as like a Rocky movie. They just treat it as this is a legitimate like sporting thing. And then others sort of do in between. And then you've got obviously like The Wrestler, which is probably closer to this movie. But at the end of the day, what this story is, I think, is about, it is like a family drama, and they keep that as the focus. So they definitely do some nice touches, which wrestling fans will enjoy because they'll get something out of that. But they don't go too far down the rabbit hole of we're going to show you behind the curtain type thing. And they definitely get across, you know, it's a very competitive business and the pressure put on these like kids and just some of the fallout. And because also they're quite a religious family, they go into that side as well. Because there's a point where Kevin believes then the family might actually be cursed, and that comes from like a religious kind of idea. But no, it's an excellent movie. I think it works whether you're a wrestling fan or not, and it's just very emotional and gripping, and very well done. So yeah, it was a bit of a shame it got overlooked at the Oscars, really, because I think it's one of the best films I've seen in the last year. So
I had to check it out.
A Joe Dante movie called Matinee. I don't know if you've ever seen or. Okay, so Joe Dante is the director of Gremlins, and and this is one of his movies. It's from the early 90s, and it fell under the radar. Really, it's a movie people obviously don't know that well. But the setup for it is then it's set at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And you've got a family, a single mother and her 2 kids who live on a base. And all that is going on in the background. But at the same time, the oldest brother escapes to the cinema. And it's around the time where they're showing like these really cheesy like B monster movies, but they're doing like these gimmick and effects like smell-o-vision and things like that.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that.
Yeah. So old school. And I think this comes from Dante's upbringing and his love for like that era of cinema. But what the film does is it links some of the things that they're doing in these movies to the real politics and the tension of the Cuban Missile thing. So it sort of looks at how these movies are starting to bring that into their plots. So that was really well done. And it's also like a coming of age story because you follow the kids and their antics and what's going on when they go to the cinema. And it's a really good movie, but it's a good movie, I think, because they keep it quite light. Like they do make it a coming of age, and there's a lot of good comedies and quite charming. But then you've also got the political stuff in the background and how that impacts on their lives. And it really goes to places at the end because there's stuff happening where they're in the cinema. It's this packed sort of screening, and it's kind of cutting between what's happening with the characters, but what's happening on the screen. It's really clever, actually. And John Goodman is in it as like he's the one who's putting on like these shows, and he's like the promoter, and he's just so charming because it's like, in a way, he's a little bit of a con man, but he's the sort of con man then you don't mind because it comes from a good sort of place, and he's making like people happy. So it's that kind of character. But yeah, Matinee it's called, from 93. So it's
I'll have to look into that one.
a gem. Yeah, I think it's one that deserves a bit more love. So I was also watching, as I said, 1984 horror movies. So a couple to talk about. I watched this movie called Mutant, aka Night Shadow. I have no idea why it's called Night Shadow or why that's another title, because when you watch the movie, it's not really clear. So I guess they went with the more simple Mutant. And it's pretty dull, that one. It's not the best. It's like set in a Texas town. You get these outsiders come in. I don't know if it's Texas, but that kind of setting, and they rub up the locals the wrong way, and then there's a plot involving mutants with some pretty good practical effects. And
Sounds familiar.
yeah, it was okay. It wasn't as entertaining as I was hoping, and it definitely dragged in places. And yeah, it was okay. It's probably one worth ticking off. And the other 84 horror I watched was Chud, which I think people would know a bit more about. But it's actually got a double Home Alone connection, because it's got John Hurd in, and it's also got Daniel Stern, and both pre-Home Alone. So that's pretty cool. So I like that. But yeah, this is one where it's set in New York City, and you've got a nuclear sort of outbreak, and you've got creatures underneath the city, so in sewers. So that's sort of the setup, and you follow these different characters. And this one, yeah, I quite enjoyed, partly because it's got that kind of 80s look of New York, where it's all grimy and steamy and gritty and quite nasty, like the movie sort of New York, rather than the picturesque New York that you get in later movies. And I appreciated that. There's some fun hammy dialogue, and like, it's not amazing, but I think it's definitely worth watching. There's some pretty good practical effects. They do that thing of, you can tell that it's really low budget because they'll do a quick cut. Like, they'll work around the monsters maybe not looking that good, where it'll just be a little quick shot of them coming out of the sewer grabbing someone, and then that'll be, they'll leave the rest for the end of the movie almost. But it's,
See, I wish more movies did that though. Like, it usually makes it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have the budget, and
just show it less. Less is more.
Well, they did that in Jaws, didn't they? Because
Yeah.
they didn't have quite the, and you're funny because you think of Jaws as like a high budget movie and stuff, but that's the one area where they didn't quite have it ready. So
Yeah, well, it's like, I know, like what
They had
happened.
so many issues with
Yeah, like Steven Spielberg initially did want to show the shark a lot more in the first one, but because they're having so many mechanical issues, they couldn't. But it's like, I feel like that would have ruined the movie if we saw the shark a lot more.
Yeah,
like it's the quick
It
little
honestly
cuts
played to their strength. It was
yes,
or to their advantage rather. It was
Right.
it was really good.
so yeah, I think with Jaws, it's almost one of those happy accidents, isn't it?
yes,
Where
Yeah.
it ended up adding to the movie.
yeah.
So that's cool. So yeah, Chud is quite good fun, especially for us horror fans who like that kind of thing, and easy enough to find. Naiad on Netflix. Have you heard of this one? It's no,
Mm-mm.
okay. So you got Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. So it's based on the real life story of the female swimmer who swam the length of the ocean, like the Atlantic. Well, it was basically from Cuba to Florida, but no one had ever done it before. And
Quite a distance.
crucially, no one had done it without the help of a shark cage, which is something they bring up in the movie. She actually chooses to do it without. So that becomes a whole thing.
Cool.
And yeah, you sort of follow her history really, because she's been a swimmer since she was a kid, since she was about 8. And she first attempted this when she was like 28, so in the peak of her career, and she didn't do it back then. So it now jumps forward to the present, where she's about to turn 60, and she decides she wants to do it. Like it's almost like, I want to do this, like a bucket list almost thing. And
I'd
so
go for it, girl.
yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, her journey becomes sort of important to the film because, like, you do get flashes in her head of the past, and it touches a little bit on like the abuse issue because apparently she was abused as a young girl. It touches a little bit on that, but it's a really good film, and I think the reason it works so well is because you really get into the relationship between her and Jodie Foster's character, because they are like best friends, and Jodie Foster is supporting her, and they have to set this whole thing up and do trials and things like that. And I think what's really good is, in some ways, the Jodie Foster character has an even more interesting story, because she's almost like the best friend who is giving up her life to try and be there for the Diane character, and emotionally be there, but also put her in a situation where she has to try and pull her away if she thinks it's getting too much, because of her age, it's a risk to her life doing this. And
yeah,
I won't spoil the movie, but it goes through several different attempts and various things come up. But I think that is the emotion of the movie, is these two characters and their relationship. And there's some fun banter back and forth, and there's some good like humor, which gives a bit of a lighter touch. Like, I quite like at one point she's about to turn 60, and she's like moaning about how, you know, when you get to that sort of age, you become like a bag of bones to people. And Jodie Foster's like, well, I wouldn't know because I'm 58. So I like little moments of humor like that.
that's funny.
Oh, that's gonna be us, isn't it, Alyssa?
Yeah. I feel like I'm already gravitating towards a bag of bones.
Oh, dear, yeah.
You know, on days that I haven't really gotten any sleep, I kind of feel that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good movie. I'd recommend it. Like, there's one or two moments where they sort of use real footage with like the film, and I'm not so keen on that because it sort of takes you out of it a bit. But it's a good movie, like quite an inspirational story, and two leads who really carry the film well. So, and that's on Netflix, so that's easy to watch. But
And what's the title again?
well, it's Naiad, which is MYAD. So
Okay,
yeah,
Okay.
easy to-
Yeah. We'll have to check that out for sure.
definitely.
And my last film, which I think is maybe my film of the month, so we're sort of back to the horror stuff a little bit, and that is Lisa Frankenstein, which I saw.
Oh,
I've
yes.
been wanting to see that.
Yes.
Yeah, well, sadly, it only got a small cinema release, so I was a bit annoyed at that. Then it didn't get more showings because they did sort of sneak it out, and I had a small window to see it. But it's definitely one I'd been waiting to see, and
The description sounded hilarious.
really cool. And yeah, they put a fresh twist on that idea where they're setting it in the 80s, but instead it's about this outcast, the Lisa of the title, who she's in an adopted family because she lost her parents, and like she goes to the cemetery every day to visit the gravestone of this long deceased person, and she starts treating almost like that's her outlet, that's her best friend, and she starts talking to him, and he mysteriously comes to life and starts living with her. And I mean, it almost has a little bit of a Heathers feel to it, I think, at times, but I think it's one of those movies where it is very niche and it's very hard to market to people, so that maybe why it was a bit under the radar. I think it will have a better life on streaming, maybe. But I mean, I went in because Diablo Cody does the screenplay, who did Juno and did Jennifer's Body as well. And Jennifer's Body needs more love, I think. But she's a really good writer. She has a quite a distinct way of writing stories and characters, has a particular like black humor and quite a feminist humor at times. And yeah, this was really good, and I just like it because it is a niche film that isn't going to appeal to everyone, but the people who really take to it, I think, will really love it. And Catherine Newton, I think, is great in the lead role. Like, she's having a lot of fun playing a little against type, I think. And you've got Cole Sprouse from Riverdale. He's the creature, and he's well cast as well. And yeah, lots of like good black humor, lots of kind of random oddball lines, which the sort of humor which a lot of people would just watch and it's like, well, what is that? Why is that funny? But if you get it, you get it, and you just laugh out loud type thing. And it's just got its own sort of flow and style, and nice use of music, nice use of colors, good chemistry with the leads. And yeah, no, it just hit me really well. And I think there are a couple of charming moments as well, because you don't necessarily think of it as necessarily like an endearing sort of film, apart from if you just latch onto the humor. But there are a couple of like sweeter moments as well. I actually quite like the relationship with Lisa and her adopted sister. They have quite, and that's an example where they subvert things a bit, because the sister is like more popular at school and is like a cheerleader, but they don't make her like the stereotype bitchy sort of popular girl. She's actually quite down to earth and very supportive of Lisa. So there were twists like that where they just didn't go with the stereotype. So yeah, I think that is probably the best film I've seen this month. Or
Yeah, I'm looking forward even more to seeing it now.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think definitely a good one to do on your show at some point.
Into the show called Mrs. Brown's Boys. I
boy.
don't know if you've heard of it. It's a Scottish show.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so I will say I am one of the trash people that will watch like the Medea movies. And so there's a Netflix Medea movie that released, and Mrs. Brown like happened to like be on it, and that's kind of like what got started. But I will say I actually prefer the humor to this show than the Medea movies, because it's like the Medea movies, yeah, they're in general like have comedy, but they do play a lot on the fact that Medea is played by a man. And it's like there's some cases where I feel like it's almost crossing the line where some people might find it problematic, but like with Mrs. Brown's Boys, it's like it's a man dressed as like this older woman, but they just ignore that. Like out of like many seasons, they only like make a joke about it like twice. But the humor itself, though, I really like, because it's like that typical like sitcom humor where like this Mrs. Brown, the mom of 3 children, is just like kind of like shitting on them because like everyone around her is stupid and she's the only like smart one, and then she's also got her husband's father, so her father-in-law is still like alive and he's really old, and so she is there's a lot of jokes that come in to play with her like wanting him to hurry up and die.
Oh my god.
And oh man, like there's this joke that it gets me every time, where it's like every time like they have a theme, like every single Christmas episode there's something that happens with the Christmas tree. And in the very first Christmas episode, she is climbing up on this bookcase to put a star on the top of the tree, and as she's coming down, she's like, "Grandpa, help me!" And the father-in-law is just like, "I'm napping. Like, I'm not gonna help you." And she's like, and as she gets to, and she ends up finding her footing, and she starts to get down. It's like, "Well, I didn't need you anyways." And then she's like, "Oh shit!" And then she like falls off the bookcase, and it's just like really random humor like that, and yeah, it's just yeah, it's a good watch. It's definitely not for everyone, but it's just it tickles me in my funny bone just right.
Okay.
So.
Okay, I won't be rushing to it, but okay. Good for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh.
So apart from Bluey, which I have seen every episode multiple times, usually once a day at least, I've been watching a lot of anime.
Okay.
Because most anime episodes are, like 20, 24 minutes long a piece. So it's nice little snippets here and there. But one of the best ones that my husband and I have been watching recently, and it just had the season finale, and it has been confirmed that there's a season 2, and we're so happy, is called Apothecary Diaries.
Okay.
And it seems almost historical, and we do find it hilarious that in the beginning of each episode, there's like a disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that says, "This is not based on real events." Like every episode, they have to make it clear that this is not that this is fiction. This is not real. And it's something that normally we wouldn't ever really watch this kind of anime or this kind of show, even if it wasn't an anime, but it's just so well done that it just draws us in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about this girl that she's kidnapped and forced to work in like the courtesan area of a palace. And she's a maid. She's treated really well, but she's essentially a slave. But she grew up watching her adoptive father, who is a doctor. He's an apothecary. So she has all this medical knowledge, and she ends up moving up in status and ends up becoming an employee instead of a slave. And she works as a food taster for one of the highest courtesans. And there are just different random events that happens that her medical knowledge helps her solve and gets her noticed by even higher people.
Okay.
And she also is a bit of an odd duck and likes to experiment with different poisons and things. But she experiments with them on herself.
Risky.
As you do.
Yeah. And she's excited by the prospect of these things. So everyone around her is like, no, stop. And she's just sitting here like, yes, let me try it. So it's really funny. There's a lot of more subtle humor with some things, and other times there's a bit more dry humor. But it's definitely an interesting one. Sorry, there's a lot of
It's okay.
a lot of stuff going on here. The chaos has begun. But there's like some politics, some intrigue. There's almost like mystery type things with certain episodes, and there's again medical issues that crop up. So, and they actually do have legitimate things that are correct. So like there's a specific flower that if bees pollinate it and produce honey after dealing with that flower, the honey itself can be toxic.
Okay.
And also honey given to infants younger than a year old can cause serious issues. And just different random tidbits that we have looked up a couple of them, and they're real.
Okay.
So they use actual legitimate facts in the show too. So that was really interesting, and the colors are beautiful and vibrant, and it's just an all-round great anime.
Yeah.
So highly recommend. It's on Crunchyroll.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds quite interesting. And I mean, on an anime front, I can recommend Delicious in Dungeons as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a weekly show on Netflix at the moment. And yeah, definitely recommend that one as well. So that's cool. So
I think Alyssa would like that one.
yeah. Absolutely.
The humor is
Yeah.
kind of up your alley.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that one.
It's a rewatch of Homeland, the Claire Danes show. And so she plays a CIA operative, and it's very much a post 11 setup. And at the start of the series, she is still recovering from a bad operation where she was kind of at fault for them not getting like an asset and things going a bit wrong. So it's the fallout of that. So you have this character played by Damian Lewis, who has just returned from war. She suspects then he might be a terrorist, undercover. So that becomes the big story of the first season, her trying to prove that he is like a terrorist. And it's something which is really well played, because they definitely keep you guessing whether he is or not, and it follows like his home life and the fallout and his family trying to pick up the pieces with him, because they assumed he was dead for a long time because he hadn't been in contact, and he was assumed dead. So yeah, that's the setup for the series. And as you go on, you get like other kind of terrorist type storylines. But a big part about those early seasons is like Claire Danes' character becomes a little too obsessed with the Brody character and like his life and proving that he is what she thinks he is. And there's tension there between the two of them. So it's a rewatch, although I've never quite seen the whole thing. I know the later seasons are supposed to be not as good, but the early seasons, the first three, I think are very strong. It's like a good tense thriller with like a slow burn type pacing, some good twists and turns. But I think what really makes it is the character drama. I think that's what makes it a bit more interesting if you're not really into these kinds of things normally. Claire Danes, I mean, is just amazing, and it's great that we get to see her for 6 seasons in this role, really flex her acting muscles and do different things, because it's like the mental health of the character comes into play, so she really gets to show off that kind of thing. And it's a complex character at times, and you've got good character drama. You've got the sole character who's like one of the confidants and has this relationship with Carrie, and almost like a father and daughter type thing, but they have a very interesting, endearing dynamic. Because I'm on season 3 at the moment, and he gets a promotion in season 3, and we actually get to see his more ruthless side in that season. So that's quite interesting. But I think actually mental health is a big theme of the show, and it's almost like the mental health of the country in general post 9/11. I think that's a big theme of what they're doing. So you get to see that with the Claire Danes character. You get to see that with the Brody character. You get to see that with his daughter Dana at one point. There's quite a dark storyline with her. And so I think that's what makes it a better show than it is more than just another, kind of CIA style thriller. Like, it is about the characters and about kind of ideas of like mental health and things like that. So it's a good meaty watch. Homeland.
Watched the first season of the Avatar Last Airbender live action Netflix show.
Okay.
But I was so excited about it that I ended up rewatching the last season of the cartoon. But yeah, it's so funny after the show first came out, because on YouTube the videos were just like so polarizing. Like one was like, why this show is absolute trash, and then another one, why this show is absolutely perfect, and there's like no in between. I will say it's a mixed bag. Like it's never ever going to live up to the cartoon. And they made some choices that I feel like I disagree with, but for the most part, I can tell, and you kind of feel like they're really trying. Like you can feel there's passion behind it. The actors are really good. I can get behind them. I know. I mean, it's like pretty much anything above the M. Night Shyamalan movie is going to beat it.
I mean,
but
that's a bit of a low bar, but
yeah, well, it's like that's why I'm still at that stage where I'm like, I don't know if that's why I like the series so much or not, but it's like the different nations are actually the right like ethnicity.
yes.
But and then they also like matured it up a bit, which was interesting and not expected. But yeah, it's like I honestly like really enjoyed it. I'm in my second watch through of it already. Like I said, it absolutely has flaws, but the acting is there. The costumes look great. I will say
Yes.
they do look slightly a little too clean. That's my only complaint. But the intricate detail, and even it was a cartoon, right? So like Aang's arrow was just like a solid blue, but I really like the fact that they made it an intricate design. Like they went above and beyond
on it.
Yes. So they went above and beyond. The bending looks great.
Yes.
And like the actor that plays Zuko, man, he is fit with some of the moves that he pulls off when he's bending.
Yeah.
I'm like, man. But yeah, and for the most part, they don't do like a whole lot of changes. Like there are not too many. Like it still very much like stays within the story. But because there's only like a 20-minute difference, but there are the changes that they did make. I'm still like, I don't know. Like I know, like whenever they're leaving the Kyoshi Island, that was a big change. But honestly, that was kind of cool though. It's like he becomes Kyoshi and just like annihilates or makes the firebenders like retreat. So it's like it's hit or miss.
People, Carl.
Yeah, it's like I feel like it is going to be one of those polarizing shows where certain fans of the original series is going to absolutely hate it because, of course, nothing can live up to the original. Or if you're in my boat, where it's like I am absolutely a fan of the original, I can appreciate the passion of this show. Or if you're in the boat of my mom, who has been watching the show with me, she never watched the original show, and she absolutely loves the live action because she has nothing to go off of.
Fresh eyes.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I watched that one as well, and I don't think I'm quite at the level that you are. Like, it's good, but it does kind of rub me the wrong way, some of the choices that they made with the plot and how, compared to the anime, they've like taken some things and mashed it with others and like changed what happens when in the timeline, and it just
and
right there.
And I know, like in Kyoshi Island, so Sokka in the cartoon like was a lot more sexist, while this one they really wanted to dial it down. But it's like I was rewatching some of the scenes and in the original cartoon, and yes, it was misogynistic, but it was coming from a place of naivety, and I don't really feel like it was that terrible.
It wasn't. It was ignorance, and he acknowledged it.
Yes. So I think maybe they were a little bit too afraid, because I know they said that they changed it because they're like, oh, having a human or, you know, two people interacting like that, it looks less appropriate than if it were a cartoon. And I can kind of see their point, but I feel like they are being a little bit too cautious and trying to, because it's like, I feel like if a character starts off as like a misogynistic piece of trash, but then they later redeem themselves and they're like, oh, sorry, I was absolutely wrong, then that's fine. That's fine. Like,
yeah, and that's what I loved about the animated series, was that if they had those misconceptions or the notions based on ignorance, and they discovered that, oh, that's not actually how it should be, or that's not how it is, they acknowledge it.
yeah,
And
because
then
they were
make
sheltered.
a change. They didn't just like acknowledge it but then stay the same. They made the change. And that's
Yes.
what made a lot of the animation so great, is they hit on those different topics and they weren't afraid to get into the grittiness of it and grow with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But so some changes like that I feel like made it a little bit more dull, but I still, the replacement wasn't terrible. Like it was more
No,
like
it's,
I'm a warrior, you know.
yeah. And
Trying
I
to
do
show off.
feel like it's a good middle ground, edging towards like much better. Like it's, instead of on that middle line, it's slightly above it.
Yeah.
As far as like the animation and the movie, which again, low bar.
Yeah.
Way low bar here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, a different show that I have seen is, I've been rewatching From.
Oh,
good stuff, yeah.
Yes. They have confirmed a season 3.
Yeah.
And they're in production right now, and I am excited for it. But if you haven't seen it, it's this family is on a road trip and they end up crashing after not circling. They keep going through the same town over and over, and they're trying to find the highway. And they keep ending up back at the same town, and they end up crashing with another car while they're trying to find a way out. And they discover that the town is very, very different. There are these entities that come out at night and try to, they just tear people apart. And they're almost like a mix between vampire and wraith.
Pardon.
Or ghoul. Like it's a very interesting mix there. And there are other things too, like at one point, a couple of the characters try to see how far they can go outside of that town into the forest, because they have these talismans that if they hang them up in a vehicle or tent or home, those wraith-like creatures can't get in unless you let them in. So they feel like, we have some kind of protection. Let's see how far we can go outside of the town and see if maybe we can get some help or leave altogether, if possible. And they run into other obstacles that are just very odd. And it's almost like they're stuck in some alternate dimension or Fey realm or something, with how weird things start to get the further out they move. So that was really, really cool. You deal with the mentality of people being stuck in one place, and also dealing with things that are trying to do them harm and trying to survive while still trying to maintain some sort of normalcy in their daily lives.
Okay.
So that's really cool. I really enjoy this series so far, and I'm excited for that 3rd season.
Yeah, it's funny because when Alyssa was on this thing before, I mentioned it then, and she said you'd been watching it. So
Yes.
nice sort of continuity. And yeah, yeah, cool. I mean, I've reviewed it, well, most of it on the channel, so people can find my thoughts. And yeah, I knew there was a season 3, which
Mhm.
will come at some point. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. I would agree with that. Interesting show. So my next pick, I'll just do a quick one actually, because it's on like almost an anime theme, but I've been preparing for the new X-Men series, so I've decided to do a rewatch of well, sort of a proper watch in a way, like I'd seen bits of it, but a watch through of the original animated series from the 90s.
Years since I've seen that.
Yeah, well, they're all on Disney Plus, so that's cool. They're all
Gotcha.
up there, and yeah, it's such a fun throwback retro style cartoon. And because you've got multiple episodes and seasons, it means you can dedicate episodes to different characters. And it's sort of funny because that and Batman the Animated Series are like the two which people say, yeah, these are the best two superhero like animated shows. And I think I like them because they appeal in different ways. Like Batman, it sort of gets the sense of that sort of moody noir sort
Yes.
of world of Gotham. Whereas this, it's like almost like you're inside an arcade game, like
Yes.
sort of thing. And it's really bright poppy colors. And you've just got a fun set of characters. Like there are some dated elements, but you know, you can excuse that because it's an animated show. And definitely it just appeals to like almost a nostalgia point of view where it feels like you put it on and you're back as a kid watching cartoons on like a Saturday morning. But
Mhm.
the theme tune is great, and it's just such a fun show to watch. So I'm gonna watch all of it, and then I'm gonna watch the new series, which is like a sequel to it.
To give some context, last month I got into the new Has Been Hotel series that was added onto Amazon and absolutely loved it. Like I remember watching the pilot as kind of like so-so, but watching the series on Amazon, I like became obsessed. And so this month I started watching their, I don't know if you call it a spin-off series, but a related series that's in the same universe called Hell of a Boss. And that one, that one is good if you don't really like musicals, because there is a lot less singing involved and the songs are more appropriate to the scene, while Has Been Hotel follows more that musical formula of like, oh, I'm gonna feel up to emotion, I'm gonna sing and dance and stuff like that. It's like Hell of a Boss is like, oh, they're going to sing like a love song to their person or sing a lullaby. Like it's more like in context of the story rather than like the musical formula. But yeah, it's like I definitely feel like Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel isn't for everybody, but because it is a particular like line of humor. But if you enjoy that humor, then it definitely hits well. They surprisingly it's all on YouTube, but it's surprising how many things they get away with, because there's lots of sex jokes and stuff involved too.
I've been meaning to watch the Has Been Hotel.
I really
Yeah,
like
me
it,
too.
but I'm a sucker for musicals, and it's like, you know, it's plays on, you know, religious tropes and plays on like the lore of you know, like Adam and Eve and
Mhm.
Lucifer and Lilith. So it's like I like the play around that where they can like kind of expand. I like the fact also that it's like they make the angels evil,
Mhm.
and then the people in hell, like they're not necessarily good guys, but you're at least sympathetic towards them. And so it's a really odd, it's like I like that dynamic play, because it's like,
Mhm.
you know, it's always very typical to be like, oh, angels are the good guys, people in hell are, you know, demons and stuff are bad. So it's always interesting to see when it flips.
Yeah.
Plus Lucifer is played by one of my favorite I don't Broadway stars. There we go. Jeremy Jordan, absolutely gorgeous voice. He also voiced Varian in the Tangled series. That was his first voice acting role. And so excited to see that he played Lucifer. He does an absolutely fantastic job. But no, both series absolutely recommend, but definitely not for everybody. Like give it 3 episodes of each, and if you don't like it, just move on.
Okay.
It's an interesting art style that they use in it too.
Yes. Yep.
Mhm.
Very unique.
But the interesting dynamic change reminds me a little bit of Supernatural.
Mm.
When they introduce the angels in that series, you think of them as like really powerful, but they're ultimately good and all. And then going through the series, you're like, wow, a lot of these angels are dicks. Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with the demons.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely interesting. Another anime that I've been watching that's been amazing, though, is called Solo Leveling.
Okay.
And we're like an episode away from the season finale, I think. Episode 11 just came out on Crunchyroll. But the first episode is so shocking out of nowhere that it just draws you in. My husband and I watched the first episode and we were like, wait, when it was over, like that's it? No, where's the next one? But it had just started, so we had to wait a whole week.
That's always a good sign.
Oh yes. And it's one of those so it's in this kind of realm where everything was normal, everything was cool, there was just a normal city daily life, and then out of nowhere these like portals started opening up and monsters came out. And people could go in them and they were basically dungeons. So when these portals started opening up, random people would call it awaken and gain different abilities and powers. Some people gain magic. Other people were able to become amazing fighters. And you had different levels if you were awakened. So there are different rankings. So the higher the ranking, the better you were at being able to go through these dungeons and fight these monsters. And when the monsters died, they would drop different things, like different stones and things. And they use those stones for energy sources or like precious gems, things like that. And the main character is like the lowest rank you could possibly have without being an awakened. So he's rank E. The lowest of the low. And when he goes to these dungeons, like he can't even really fight very well because he's so low rank. He's basically a hindrance. But he goes into the lowest rank dungeons and they find in this particular dungeon that there's an extra area after the boss, which is extremely rare. It's called a double dungeon. And they're like, well, it's a low-ranked dungeon. The other enemies weren't that big a deal, so let's just continue on. But when they get to the area boss, all hell breaks loose. People are dying left and right. It is bloody out of nowhere, and you're sitting there like, what is happening? And it takes a huge left turn. But he gains these incredible abilities and all out of nowhere that no one else seems to have. And you're not supposed to be able to improve your skills. Like once you're awakened, that's it. Like you stay at that level. You can't get a higher rank or anything unless you have a reawakening, which is even more rare. And usually only happens in ridiculous circumstances. But again, if you have a reawakening, you move like up a rank or two and you stay that rank. But this guy keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's such a unique style that they're using and unique plot, and we're just completely sucked into it. And each week we can't wait for the next episode.
Okay.
So highly recommend that one.
I'll do a couple of sitcoms together because it's the sitcoms I'm watching at the moment. So I'm doing a rewatch of Blackadder, which I tend to
I've
watch
heard of that one.
most years. Absolutely love it, with Rowan Atkinson, Tony Robinson. So a period like comedy, and each season is a different era basically, but there's a series of like running jokes. Normally most seasons ends with spoiler, the characters in peril and potentially dying, and they have running gags. But yeah, it's one of those. So we're on series 2 at the moment, which is the Tudor era, and I think that's one of the best series.
Is that the one with Hugh Laurie as well?
He might
in
be.
season 2. I
He
can't.
might be in a later episode. I think he's in the next series.
Okay. Okay.
But you've got a lot of the familiar cast, which they kind of bring back, but in different roles in other series. But like you've got Stephen Fry in there. This is the season with Miranda Richardson as Queenie, and she's great as Queenie. But like the first episode is a good example of like the humor where you have this character who's a girl who like leaves her old life. Her father wants her to be a prostitute, and she dresses as a man because it's that sort of like time. But it's a flip on that sort of joke where the characters around her don't recognize that she's actually a girl, and she's calling herself Bob, even though it's plainly obvious to the audience. So it's one of those sorts of jokes. And eventually, when he finds out she is a girl, Blackadder falls in love with her, and there's meant to be like a wedding, and there's a whole joke about who's going to be the best man. And you've got this character of Lord Percy who's like just a complete like fool, and he's desperate to be like the best man. And there's a gag where they're considering everybody else but him type thing. And it eventually gets to the wedding, and they're hoping this character Lord Flashheart is going to show up, and he's played by Rick Mayall, who again appears throughout the series. And yeah, you should watch the scene where he makes his entrance, and he's just like this over-the-top, flamboyant sort of ladies' man. It's like he literally bursts into the door, and there's a flash of like lightning, and it's hilarious. It's a great payoff to the episode. There's another episode in that season where it features Sir Walter Raleigh, and there's a whole thing about Blackadder getting jealous because everybody in the town is making a big deal out of him. So to try and impress the Queen, he goes on a voyage of his own, and he gets together this ship and like this sailor who's always drunk and stuff, and it turns out isn't quite the sailor he's making out. And that's a really good episode as well. One scene I love in that episode is Lord Percy. He's claiming, I'm going to invent gold. And so when it comes to the scene, he's actually got like a little blob of green slime. And Blackadder's like, yeah, what you've actually invented is something called green. And just Lord Percy's excitement in the scene is just so funny when he's like, I'm going to market this blob of green. But that's just a dose of the humor of the show. But it's a classic from the 80s, and it really holds up. And no spoilers really, but the final season, where it's set during the World War, is actually the end of it. The very end of it is really poignant, and it's one of the first sitcoms to really actually end with a serious moment, like a genuine like humor moment. And it kind of in a way inspired other sitcoms to like not be afraid of that. And yeah, it's a great sitcom. And the other sitcom I've been watching is another British show called Peep Show. I don't know if you've heard of this one. Okay, so a pair of mismatched like flatmates. So they're played by the comedians David Mitchell, Robert Rebb, and they're completely opposite. Mitchell's character is like the more ambitious career guy, more sort of educated, and the other one's a more layabout slacker, wants to get into the music industry. But the style of it is like really peculiar, and you'll have to get used to the style because it's done in a POV style way where when a character's talking, it's from the other character's point of view. So you actually see the other person rather than on that character, and you hear like the inner thoughts of the character as they're reacting. So literally everything that's on their mind, like if they're in an awkward situation on a date, what's running through their mind. And there's a lot of really cringe sort of humor, but it's the sort of thing where it like literally follows through like almost in real time every scene, because like just a small example, like in the first episode, Mark, he's got a crush on a girl at work and he sees her getting on the bus, so he rushes to the bus to catch it in time, and he's in such an excitement to sit down, then she sits on his hand and doesn't realize, and he's too embarrassed and he doesn't want to kill the moment, so he spends ages debating, should I tell her, should I move it slowly? But that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, where you literally get every inner thoughts and this like real-time situation. Yeah. So it does take a bit of getting used to the sense of humor, but it's a really good show, especially once you get into other characters that are on the show, and has quite a unique sense of humor. Oh, one gag I like in the first episode is when like they're interested in the same girl who lives in the building, and like Jeremy, the other one, says then they watched a porno together, and Mark asks her about this later. She's like, that wasn't a porno, that was The English Patient. So that kind of thing. But yeah, Peep Show, I'd recommend checking it out. And probably not for everyone, but if you like it, I think you'll really like it.
Louis, because it's a kids show that does cater to adults as well. It's a good like comfort show, you know, when you had a crappy day and you just need to curl up and go back to the good old times. It's like go revert back into your childhood for a while. It's but it's like, yeah, it's like you know, it's wholesome from watching it from the kids' point of view, but then the adults, like how they interact with the kids, it's like they do such a fabulous job, like kind of like redirecting what they're doing, and then but also like still encouraging like their play and fantasy and stuff like that. Like they never like discourage their kids from fantasizing or playing or having fun. They just kind of like redirect it in a way that's that parents are like more accepting of, I guess is the best way to put it. So like for example, like there's a episode where like the kids are playing is like, oh, if it's a shadow it's safe, but anything under the
Shadowlands,
like, yeah. And it's like the parents are just chilling, like, you know, chatting and stuff like that. And I know there's other episodes where they're like, oh, well, let's pretend this to kind of like redirect it. But it's like the parents are so chill. They're not like, cut that shit out.
Yeah, no, they encourage the play and they use it to teach them different lessons.
Yes. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, it's a guilty pleasure, but
oh, mine's a guilt-free pleasure with it.
Well, you have an excuse. You have a child. You can watch it with an adult.
So?
But yeah.
It's a masterpiece of a show, and you cannot change my mind. It's probably the best, most recent kids show that has come out.
Yeah, yeah. Miles above Peppa Pig.
Oh my god, yes. That nightmare-inducing crap. No.
Yeah.
No, this one, the animation is decent. The characters are all relatable. like the kids, from a kid's point of view, they're completely relatable and they have actual problems that they work through. The adults, though, watching from a parent's point of view, I have learned stuff. And they're so real feeling, and I feel seen because like they normalize the mess of having kids. Like if you watch one of the episodes, they don't shy away from showing like crumbs and toys and stuff in the couch cushions, or if they show the car, there's like different food pieces all over the back seat and toys and stickers everywhere. And it's just so nice to know that, you know, this is normal and this is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of these other shows that you watch on TV, if they have kids, like the house is still spotless and the car is spotless and everything is nice and perfect. And that's not how it actually is. Because kids are messy.
Messy, yeah.
So very messy. So it's nice, and they encourage the imagination, and they don't shy away from big emotions either. They help them work through it, and they help them identify it, and help them put it to like use different outlets for it. So maybe they're not with these big emotions; they're doing things that are a bit more destructive. Let's redirect it in play. And they had another episode, Bad Mood, where the mom accidentally hurt Bingo, the youngest kid's feelings, by saying she was acting cheeky. Like she isn't a cheeky kid, she was just acting cheeky. Well, then Bingo is now in a very bad mood and is upset. So the dad acts as her bad mood and is walking around with her and like throwing stuff and like making her eat chocolate and like yelling and running around and just causing mayhem basically. And her big sister Bluey is trying to get her out of the bad mood and is trying different tactics like let's draw a picture, let's play your favorite song and dance to it. Let's get her in a good mood. And the mom becomes the good mood. And when Bingo is put in the good mood, she gives cuddles and is nicer and is drawing things. And then she ends up going and hugging the dad, her bad mood, and saying, he's not bad. He's just acting bad. So she understands that you can feel something without being that thing. Mm-hmm. So you learn different things like that in each episode, and it's wonderful. And I wish there was more of them.
Okay. Fair enough. Bluey.
Yes.
Okay. We're jumping all over the place. That's
you can pry Bluey from my cold dead hands.
Random watch, which I just, because there's a streaming service called BritBox over here, which kind of brings together BBC, ITV, Channel 4 shows, and like I randomly clicked on a show called Rent-A-Ghost, which pretty much does what it says on the tin, but it's a 70s show. And I went into it blind and thinking, well, maybe it's going to be an anthology because I quite enjoy anthology. But it's just this very light-hearted, quirky. I don't know if it's meant to be a comedy or just a lighter kind of like sort of show. But yeah, the setup is this guy has just died and his parents are like renting out like the room like in their house. And they literally start up like a Rent-A-Ghost, like the title says, where they can rent out ghosts to people to help them in different like cases. And that's kind of the show, because as I said, the son has just died, and it's a bit hard and fast on what exactly is going on, because he can appear to them, so they don't know that he's actually dead. So that becomes like a plot. And then he provides like the ghosts. So you have like ghosts that are from history, like people back in history, and it's like one of them's dressed up as like a jester, and you get them in like period type costumes, and you get gags about them not understanding modern like lingo, but it's just one of these, you put it on and it is very 70s, but it's like, I don't know how to take this exactly. I don't know exactly what this is. And I'm not sure if I quite enjoy it or not, or if it's just a bit too silly and cheesy and I can't really take it seriously. I'm going to actually, in the edit, I'm going to insert insert the theme tune, because the theme tune is so kind of 70s and quirky sort of sitcom type thing, but I wasn't sure if it's meant to be a comedy, because a lot of it is just like funny moments, but there's no real gag in a way. But it's like I've watched 2 episodes and I think I'm quite enjoying it just in a retro way, rather than this is actually any good sort of thing. Like, there's definitely a couple of chuckles in there. But yeah, it's just one I stumbled upon, and you can probably find it somewhere online, but that's Rent a Ghost.
If your mansion house needs haunting, just call Rent a Ghost. We've got spooks and ghouls and freaks and fools at Rent a Ghost. Hear the Phantom of the Opera sing a haunting melody. Remember, what you see is not a mystery, but Rent a Ghost. At your party, be a smarty and hire Rent a Ghost. If you want a fright, climb the spooky heights with Rent a Ghost. You can let our spirits move you, and for fun play Ghostman's Knock. Because we aim to shock, we hook your knees will knock. That's Rent a Ghost. Let me say the most horrific simple ghost, not scientific, merely supernatural buoys of the day. Heavy footsteps in your attic means a spectre telepathic is descending just to spirit you away. Hey! We are extraordinary fellas here at Rent a Ghost. To be another Yuri Geller, come to Rent a Ghost. For a biography with ghost writers, and not forgetting a ghost script. An apparition crypt from deep inside a crypt. Ring Rent a Ghost. An apparition crypt from deep inside a crypt. Ring Rent a Ghost.
And my other one is I've been watching the new Netflix series Three Body Problem. So so this is from the Game of Thrones team. It's based on quite popular fantasy novels. And I'm reviewing it. I'm sort of doing an episode a day at the moment. There's 8 episodes, I think, overall, in the first series anyway. And the setup is you've got this scientist in 60s China who is imprisoned, and it's after she's watched her father get killed. And it's as a result of the military state, who are basically pro-religion, but anti any sort of science and scientific thought. So this family are very much into science and have other ideas about religion and things like that. So that's why they're targeted. And she's arrested because she's like authored this book, which is about science and things. But at one point, because they see her talent, they actually get her to develop this new technology, this new science. And where it leads is they want her to develop this technology which will like communicate with life on other planets, and they want to use that. So it goes into a whole sort of trippy sci-fi area, and it jumps between timelines, because then you get the current timeline and you get characters in London who are like scientists, and there's a link between the two timelines which slowly comes out. And yeah, it really goes places, because you've got like a meaty political thing, you've got modern themes, like it mentions kind of things like AI and deep fakes, things like that. bit of a mystery, and then you've got a high concept sci-fi, and also some wacky scenes because literally characters go inside a virtual reality video game. At one point, they put on a headset and they go inside, and they actually have to do different levels, and it kind of comes back to the theme to do with like climate and things like that. And again, this idea of religion against science is a constant theme. So it's good, I would say. It's definitely good. Like the first episode is a setup episode. It takes a bit of getting into the characters, and because it's balancing a lot of different themes, so you have to get into the flow of it. But I like a lot of the ideas that it's playing with. There's some good moments of humor as well, which I think you need in this sort of show. And you've got a pretty solid cast. And when they go inside the video game, like the virtual reality realm, you can see where the money is. Like they've spent a lot of money on the production, and it does look really glorious. So it's definitely worth watching. Yeah, that's Free Body Problem, which is
Free
on
Body
Netflix.
Gotcha.
So worth
Yeah, I'm
a
gonna
look.
have to check that one out too.
Yeah, it sounds like sort of thing you might be interested
Mhm.
in. Yeah. So is that everything? TV? Is there any more?
I've got a lot more anime but that's for another time.
Okay.
We
yeah.
watch a lot of anime.
Okay.
All we
No
have
worries.
time for usually, apart from Bluey and Winnie the Pooh. So
Okay. Oh, that was fun. That was a fun chat. So before we round up, I'll give you guys a chance to promote your channel and what you do.
Sure. Well, if you want to see me and Jess review horror movies, our YouTube channel is Horror Movie Tea, but we're also on Podbean and most podcast platforms.
we also on once a month play horror games and scare ourselves silly. And that's on the first
Yeah.
Saturday of every month on YouTube and Twitch.
Great stuff. And those streams are fun. I can attest to that.
Yeah, we enjoyed your commentary during the contradiction.
Yes, we did greatly.
Thanks. Yeah, go. I'll put the link in the description, but go and check out their channel and be sure to let us know what you guys have been watching and react to our picks as well. But thanks, Jess. Thanks, Alyssa. And yeah, support the channel, support my channel as well. Like and subscribe. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for
Goodbye.
having us.